Hello, everyone. My name is Mallory. Whoa, that's a weird intro. Do not know why. Hello, everyone. You're listening to Those Other Girls. I'm Mallory, and we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. Okay, I'm gonna keep that in because that was really weird. I don't know why I started off like that. It is like kind of late for me. I like to go to bed around 9, and it's like almost 8:30ish. So maybe that's what that is. Anyway, hey everybody, we have Annie back. If you guys remember, episode a couple of episodes ago, I'm going to look it up really quick. We had Annie, and she is the founder of No Such Thing as Unplanned. And we have her back today to discuss adoption. Let me look up that episode really quick to see which one it was. So everybody, and I'll also link it. This is kind of like going to be the part 2 of that episode where we're just going to talk a little bit about adoption, and we're going to talk about episode 93. We're going to talk about adoption, and we're going to talk about because this episode, you guys are going to be hearing this during Sanctity of Life Month, and adoption as an alternative to abortion. So we'll be talking about all those things. Anyway, without further ado, Annie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about your nonprofit?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me again. This is so fun. So yeah, my name's Annie. I'm a college student at Benedictine College. I study theology. I'm a pretty normal kid, but I do run a nonprofit called No Such Thing as Unplanned. And basically we are a platform by adoptees for adoptees, where we have, we're a platform where adoptees can connect, share, and find support. And so I started this back in April. And so we've been continuing it, expanding on it, working on it. And we're just trying to reach and help out as many of the adoptees as possible. So we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up soon.
Yes. If you are listening and you are an adoptee, wow, we're like both really tongue-tied
right now.
If you are listening and you yourself are an adoptee, or you know someone that's an adoptee, seriously connect them with No Such Thing as Unplanned. This is it's a very needed nonprofit, especially coming from the aspect of pro-life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And are you guys would you consider yourself Christian, or is it kind of non-denomination or non?
So we are open to anyone of any background, political, religious, pro-life, pro-choice. We are simply pro-adoption. So we want to help out any adoptees, get them support that they need, regardless of background or views on anything.
Yeah, and that's really good because I think, and then, obviously it's not, but Annie is a devout Catholic, so everything she's going to come at it is going to be with the love of Christ. And I think that's really important. And that is what makes platforms like Annie's or other platforms that are run by people who are Christians, that makes it different than other ones. Not saying that other people can't, be kind, but there is something different and special when someone who is a Christ follower is in charge of it. So I guess let's get started with you told us a little bit about your nonprofit.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about and you gave your story already, but can you do maybe a quicker or maybe a 5-minute version of it, of like your journey as an adoptee and all that stuff?
Yeah, I can give a quick little snippet. So I was adopted when I was 6 months old from an orphanage in Russia. And good life. My parents gave me so many great, awesome opportunities. But growing up, it was really hard. I think that's something that's not talked about a lot in adoption circles, or it hasn't in the past. It's starting to be, but it was really hard growing up adopted because you have all of these internal thoughts. And for a long time, I realized I was an unplanned pregnancy. And so for a long time, I thought there was no plan in my life from God. And so that was a really big struggle. And throughout my high school years, it was just kind of going back and looking into those thoughts and into my adoption story and learning my adoption story and asking more questions that I was able to heal, and realize that in God's eyes, there is no such thing as unplanned, which is where our name comes from. And then from there, after some really big healing moments, I felt God call me to share my story. So I shared it for the first time at a little high school pro-life retreat. And then I got myself involved with Students for Life of America. And I was able to kind of share my story more with people, like one-on-one, more online, through writing, through a couple speaking engagements. And then I started a blog called No Such Thing as Unplanned, but I wanted to take it further. And so then I started the nonprofit, which is what I have now. And so that's kind of the really, really short version of my story and how I got to be where I am today.
Thank you. And everyone listening, episode 93, you can hear her full explanation. So my first question I have is, when we are having conversations with pro-aborts, people who are pro-abortion, one of the things they are very much, it seems as if they're against adoption. It seems like the only option that there is to abort. There's adoption's this evil, terrible thing. Do you have any reason, or do you think you know why they feel that strongly? Or
well, I'll start with this. I'll say in 1993, Planned Parenthood released a statement, more of a lie, that said this. It said, the psychological responses to abortion are far less serious than those experienced by women bringing their unwanted pregnancy to term and relinquishing the child for adoption. So that lie was planted in the 90s by Planned Parenthood. That
wow.
Abortion is better than adoption. And I obviously, as an adoptee, I'm going to disagree with that. And I think anyone who's pro-life, logical, is going to disagree with that. Studies show now that that getting abortion actually does have severe consequences. It's harder to find in the United States because we don't have as much research, but if you look at other countries that have had abortion legalized for a very long time, we can see the many issues that come from it, the psychological, emotional, and physical wounds that come from it. Adoption, yes, also has those. There are huge wounds that come out of adoption, especially for the birth moms. It's a loss. They're losing someone, and for the adoptees as well. But I will say that when you abort a child, when a mother aborts their child, they're going to end up wounded. They're going to end up, their child is gone. The child is dead, unfortunately. And they're going to end up with serious wounds for the rest of their life. And it's going to hurt them and hurt the people around them. Whereas if you choose life, you're giving hope. You're giving new life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When you choose abortion, there's nothing good that's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
It's very hard. There will be healing and restoration, yes. It's really, really hard. It's just completely damaging. Adoption, there's wounds, it hurts, but it's life-giving. It gives hope. It gives a future to somebody. Does that make sense?
Yes. I feel like, I don't want to say, because there's many reasons why people have unplanned pregnancies, but I feel like it's almost a way of correcting a wrong, or like, I don't want to say that the sex was wrong, because I don't know why people had the unplanned pregnancy. You could be that.
I think one point is it could have been a very bad situation. Like my example, like my birth mom was 17. I mean, from my own thoughts, I don't believe that she had much support. She wasn't financially stable. We know that. And so it was a bad situation, but the adoption brought good out of it,
Right. And I think it's just a great way to do that. And like, I love how you said brought hope. One of the things that I really wanted to reiterate across this podcast, across all of our platforms this month, is the hope in life, especially when, there's so many things that is going on in the world today that, like, sometimes life feels very hopeless. I know I felt that way as well. But I really like what you said, that it's giving, adoption brings hope. My next question is, if someone adopts, and we kind of did a couple of questions like this before, but hopefully this isn't the same question, but if it is, here it is. If someone adopts someone from a situation like that, similar to your situation, or even, from a person who has been raped or something along those lines, what are some tips you think that the parents can do early on for that child?
Yeah. My number one thing is tell them their story at what's age appropriate.
Right.
Let them know what their story is, and be open. I think their kid has a right. The adoptee has a right to their story,
right,
to know it. And I think waiting longer actually makes it a lot harder, more traumatizing to an extent. And so I would say tell them their story, make it an open dialogue. I think something now that we did not have 20 years ago, especially in when I was being adopted and everything, open adoptions are huge, and having
So
that
would you
relationship.
suggest an open adoption?
Yeah, studies show that they're beneficial.
Okay.
They're healthier for everyone in the triad. Because
Really? Okay.
a closed adoption, there's a lot of ambiguity. Ambiguity? I don't know how to say it.
Ambiguity? Yeah.
Ambiguous loss. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of just questions that will never be answered. You don't like, even from practically, like, you don't know your medical history. Like, I go to the doctors and they say, "Do you have a history of this?" And I have to say I'm adopted. I might. I don't know. I might. There's things like that. And there's so many more, I think, added wounds of abandonment and rejection. With the open adoption, there's going to be those wounds there, but there's answers, and I think there's more of a fulfilled healing. There's more closure. There's that relationship that can also be so like restorative and healing as well. So I'm huge on like open adoptions. I would also recommend counseling. When kids start to have those questions can be pretty deep. Of like, oh, like, if my mother didn't love me, like, I must be bad, or like maybe I'm not good enough. And those thoughts, like, I think we all have those thoughts from whatever wounds to an extent, regardless whether you're adopted or not. You have these thoughts, and they carry in through adulthood. So it can be hard, really hard. So I would highly recommend counseling from like a younger age when those questions start to appear, even maybe before it, to really help your child work through that. Family counseling as well. I know with I was listening to a talk, and they were saying a lot of times, and this is true in my own life, that the adoptee struggles with a relationship with their mom because that wound is basically with the birth mom. Does that make sense? And so a lot of times
they struggle with the birth mom.
So there's that wound with the birth mom, and so then that anger, that pain is taken out with the adoptive parent. The adoptive
like the adoptive mom. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That does, like, psychologically, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so the relationships can be very like difficult in that sense. And so I would say counseling, family counseling from a younger age to work those out, to get healing right away is really good. And then they'll have better and healthier relationships in the long run. Because I didn't know that was a thing up until recently. Because me and my mom always had a rocky relationship, and I never understood why.
Yeah.
And then learning that in counseling and stuff, and now we have a better relationship and everything. But but I think that could have been avoided to an extent. I think that's a huge thing, is just counseling, and so you can have those healthier relationships, work through those attachment issues, because regardless of where you're adopted, how you're adopted, how that story comes to be, there's going to be attachment issues and trauma.
Yeah. And I think actually, first question. So when do you think you should start talking to your child about them being adopted? Like, what age do you think is appropriate?
So my parents never, like, I always knew I was adopted.
Okay.
So I think my parents were telling me before I even understood what that means.
Okay.
So I just grew up knowing I was adopted. So, having little books about adoption. I know my parents had a lot of those. We still have those like children's books on adoption, on what adoption is and stuff. And I remember reading those before I fully understood what adoption was. So I mean, the earliest ages, and just kind of growing up with that story, again, like age appropriate.
Right.
And then having that open space.
And then, so my other question is, why do you think that people should know, like, why do you think adoptees want to know their story? Like, what do you think about people? Because I'll say for myself, like, or their history. Because I'll say for myself, it could just be me, but I'm not really that interested in my like my family history. Like, I mean, if have some lost grandmother that was a queen or something, I definitely would like to know that. Or if there's like money buried somewhere that's entitled to me, yeah, I'd like to know that. But like, I honestly am not like, I don't just do the history thing, like, yeah, I'm part 183rd Cherokee. Like, to me, that just doesn't, I don't care. Why do you think adoptees do?
Well, I mean, I think everyone wants to know their story to an extent.
Okay.
I think that's such a big part of who we are as our identity.
Yeah.
But I mean, who doesn't want to know who their mom is?
Yeah, that's
Who
okay.
doesn't
That's a
want to
good
have that
point.
relationship with their mom or with their dad?
Yeah.
And I think,
There's,
I mean, there's something about biology. You know, I'm not,
yeah.
I don't know everything about neuroscience, and I'm not a psychologist, but I mean, there's something about biology that connects us. I mean, you have, I mean, think about it. You're in the womb developing some sort of bond relationship with this woman that you might never meet. You're not going to
Yeah.
bond to outside of the womb, but there's a bond there. You're in her
Yeah.
womb for 9 months. There's some sort of bond there. There's an attachment. And so when you're taken away from that, there's something inside of you that just kind of knows that there's something missing to an extent. And so I would say, who doesn't want to know their mom? And I
And
think
that's,
that's something that a lot of adoptees grapple with.
yeah, okay. Now that makes a lot of sense. Like that, because I will say, like, I'll ask my mom things about her and my grandma too, because my grandma lived with us before she passed away. So like I'll ask about my grandma, but like I'm gonna be honest, I don't really ask too much about my great grandma, but I am interested in my mom and I am interested in my dad. And you're right, there
Right.
is that biological, and I think that's why probably the wound with the mother is the probably the biggest, is because there was that biological
Right.
attachment first. So and like we women are so beautifully unique. We do something that men can never,
Yeah.
could never, like it's impossible. No man will be able to do this, to hold and like to birth life, to bring life into this whole big beautiful world God's given us. So that is a very good point, that there is something about like knowing your mother, something about that bond, the biological, because you're right, it is absolutely biological. It is a
Mhm.
biological thing that we want to be around our moms, to
Right. And I
know
would
about
even
our
say, like,
moms.
a child that's not adopted, but maybe had a mom that wasn't present in their life, like, they ache for their mother. They ache for that
Absolutely.
bond. And so I think that's
Yeah.
just, it's just a human thing, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean I've seen it. I've seen in some of the work I've done in the community, I've seen people who've had very distant moms, and I've watched the kids. The mom could be yelling at them, just about to slap them, and I'm ready to, if she did slap them, I'd be right. But like you can see the mom is so like about the kid, but the child is still like, "Mommy, look." Like there's just
Right.
something that we want to know
Right.
with our mom, and it's that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've just never really thought about it this way, about why, like, how important and how integral to society too, as well, that we women are so important.
Mm-hmm.
And to throw God into this, the Bible pretty much outlays that. The Bible does talk about everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people's relationship with their mothers and their
Yeah.
bonds and stuff. Like God does make it clear that we women are unique. We
Yeah.
are special, where
Mm-hmm.
God cares about us and cares about our, how we interact with the world. Okay, so another question, adoption related. So friends, when you have friends that are adopted, and that are very open about it, what are some like taboo things that you probably like shouldn't bring up, or like, or what, how, yeah, what are some like taboo things you probably shouldn't bring up?
First thing is adoption jokes. Um, yeah, no, I've had friends who know I'm adopted. I'm open about it. You know, like everybody knows that about me. Obviously, I'm here talking about it. But people who get too comfortable with it, I would say like that make jokes. Like any
Yeah.
adoption jokes just like aren't funny. I wouldn't bring that up. And then also just like knowing your friend. If you know they're open about it, it's probably fine. If you know they're adopted but they never talk about it, probably a good sign. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a person by person basis of where they're at, how, and also how well you know them.
That's
There's
a good
there's
point
parts of my
too.
adoption story that I'm just never gonna like say in public or say to a stranger, but
Right.
I'll like share certain parts of healing and parts of my adoption with really close friends or mentors. And so, yeah, I would say like the number one thing is just don't make jokes about adoption. They're not funny. Um,
Yeah.
be respectful of that story. Like stories are so sacred. So just being respectful of that story. Yeah.
And just maybe you can touch on this, but what you had mentioned about, if someone doesn't talk about their adoption story, then that probably means you shouldn't either. I remember a girl I grew up with, she was adopted, and we never, like, I only knew it because, like, so she was Black. Her mom was Black, but her dad was Puerto Rican.
Mm.
And like, but you like there was she did not look mixed at all. Like it was obvious that like maybe like if I feel like if my mom hadn't mentioned it to me, I would have just thought maybe she was like from another marriage, something like that. But
Mhm.
and my our parents were good friends. So I think that's probably why my mom mentioned it, kind of just like, hey, heads up, just so you're not like saying something stupid, like when we're kids, we kind of just, so why doesn't your daddy look like,
Right. There's no
So
filter.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
right. So, but I just remember like growing up, I feel like I'm like now thinking back, and we were in school together for a really long time, and we were really close. We like worked together.
Mhm.
At one point, I don't think we ever talked about it. I don't think she ever brought it up. And like I said, if my mom hadn't told me when I was younger to like, watch what you say, pretty much, then I don't think I would have even known. So I think that's like you made a good point. That's a like everybody is different, so you have to respect people
Right.
and their boundaries that they have, because that's clearly a boundary that
Mhm.
she has for whatever reason. Obviously I didn't ask her and I'm not going to, but that's a
Yeah.
boundary she has.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I remember like for a long time I was so ashamed of it. Like
Oh,
I
that's
didn't even want my parents to bring it up, let
yeah.
alone a friend or a stranger. And so I think you never know whether someone's ashamed of it or not. Like obviously I'm not anymore because it's all over the internet at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who, you never know. And so just like being respectful, or like, even if you're not for sure and they're adopted, say, hey, are you open to questions? Can we talk about your story? And if they say no, leave it at that, leave it alone.
Yeah.
Don't, stuff like that. If yeah.
So, question about what you just said, shame. What would be,
Mm-hmm.
why would you feel shame? Because in my head, ignorant, in my head, I'd be like, oh, wow, that must feel great. You know for sure that someone wanted you. No matter what, at the end of the day, someone definitely wanted you. Whereas sometimes, your parents, they love you, but they might do something, or even like they might make comments. So,
Mm-hmm.
where's the shame aspect come from?
I mean, it comes from internal wounds.
Okay.
So, I mean, you talk about, so let's leave the adoptive parents out of it. Okay. And we go back to the biological parents. That it's trauma, but like you're rejected. It's
Mm-hmm.
abandonment. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have these thoughts of, oh, no one loves me, or I'm not wanted, or I'm not a gift. And that's shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
so, there's those feelings of, oh, like I'm not good enough. And so you kind of just, as an adoptee, you might walk around just feeling like or like you don't belong. I know a lot of adoptees struggle with like, yes, I have a good family and I love them, but I've never felt like I've belonged in my family. Like I've always felt different. And so there's like, yes, there's that beauty of being chosen that is so true. And it's a true beauty. It's valid, but there's also underlying trauma and just heartache and pain that come from it as well. And so you can be pretty ashamed of it. Yeah.
Um, Another question I just thought of, if someone is listening and they have an adoptive child that has expressed that they kind of feel maybe it's a transracial adoption, or
Mm-hmm.
even a transcultural adoption, um, and they have a child that feels as if they're not fitting in, or do you have any advice for what the parent can do, or how the parent can try to maybe ease their child's feelings? I guess I don't know what I'm trying to
I
say.
mean, I think the main thing that parents can do is be there for their kid, get them counseling if they need it. I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, we can't read our kids' minds. We can't read other adoptees' minds. We don't know what's going on. And so
Right.
it's kind of up to the adoptee to say something. And that's really hard if you're a kid because you might not have the language for that. Kids
Yeah.
kids might feel something but not understand how it's going on. So that might come out
Yeah.
as anger or acting out or whatever it may be. But for parents just to be aware, I think parents to be educated and aware on some issues that can occur, that can happen from trauma from their kid. But every kid has a different temperament and everyone has a different story. I know so many adoptees who said, like, yeah, I'm adopted and that's just part of my story. It's never affected me. Whereas for me, it was a big wound and a big struggle. it depends on the kid, but I would say like parents to be educated, to never shame their child, to use the adoptee language, and to be able to provide counseling and just the support that they need. Just growing up, I think that's the best thing that parents can do is simply just being there and being present with their child, and definitely making sure that they know that they're loved. That's huge.
That's good. That's good. Hopefully, if someone is listening, that they will be able to share this episode and some of the resources that you have on your website.
Right. And that's kind of part of some of our stuff that we're doing right now. We're expanding things like that. So we're going to be adding more educational content to our websites, and we're going to make some stuff specifically just for parents. So I would kind of keep your eye out for some of that stuff at No Such Thing as Unplanned too.
Yes, I'll link it all. I'll link the website in the description for everybody. Really quick, I guess maybe not quick, but we talked a little bit about a book that you would recommend. Can you say the book really quick?
Yeah, so it's called The 7 Core Issues of Adoption. And basically what it is it was published in the early 1980s. And it's basically these 7 lifelong issues that affect all members of the triad. So adoptive parents, birth parents, and adoptees. And basically it's things like loss, rejection, guilt, shame, grief, identity, control. And basically what this book is, it explains all of these in detail, and it explains, how and why and what, and it has all that information within it, that it kind of explains the psychological reasonings for that, but also it gives us tools and things to use to go forward and to help heal those difficulties, those wounds, and to have effective and healthy relationships and mindsets. And just it's all within healing. It's secular, but I found it and we love it, and I use it at NSTU for our so we're going to start up our adoptee support soon. So I'm basing the majority of our adoptee support with this book, and then we're also working with counselors and people trained in specifically adoption and attachment trauma to make it a safe place. But we're using this, and this is I recommend it to anybody in the adoption triad, or counselors, or people who want to know a little bit more about adoption. It really helps with understanding the psychological wounds and the feelings that come from being adopted that are more on the negative side, and how we can help those.
That's really good.
I think it would be great for parents, actually. I would highly recommend it for adoptive parents, because it can help them, and it can heal a lot of wounds with them, but it can help them understand how to help their child, because it kind of explains what goes on. So for example, it'll talk about loss. It'll talk about loss with the birth parent. It'll talk about loss with the adoptive parent, and it'll talk about loss with the adoptee. So for a parent, it can help them, but then it can also help them understand their child and how best to help the adoptee.
That's really good. I think, so everyone listening, not everyone, I'm assuming most people listening consider themselves pro-life. And I know that myself and so many others, we are considering eventually adoption. That is something that is definitely on my heart. That is something that I've wanted to do for years. I have cousins that are adopted, and I don't know, it's just something I've always considered. So what are some things that you would recommend, I guess, for those of us who want to in the future, maybe for stuff that we should be doing now, almost like in preparation? I know for me, obviously, I'd like to wait till I'm married, so right. God knows how long that'll take. But let's say within the next 5 years, I get married, and I would consider adopting soon. I wouldn't, there's some people who like to have their kids and then adopt. I'd rather however God does it, I'm open to it. So let's say within the next 5 years, what are some things that myself and those listening we could do to prepare to be adoptive parents?
Well, I think ultimately just start preparing yourself now. I would start working on yourself now, becoming a better person, becoming that wife, choosing those things now, learning how to, sacrifice, and just how to be a good person in general, especially working on your own wounds. And then, just personal growth, all the way up there. And then I would also say, educate yourself on adoption, educate yourself on, the reality of adoption. I think a lot of people have these ideas of adopting a child from like Africa or Haiti and having this perfect little adopted family. It's not always like that. There's kids in the foster care system that need to be adopted. There's kids in your own state, in your own town that need to be adopted. International adoption is also beautiful. I'm internationally adopted. But, you know, what is the Lord, if you're a Christian, asking, like, what is the Lord calling you to?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, where do we want to go? Because actually, one of my professor's wives always wanted to adopt, and she would always hear God telling her foster care. And now they foster several children. They have like 8 kids at their house. And so, you know, ultimately, is the Lord calling me to adopt?
That's a good
Some
point.
people aren't called to adopt, and that's okay. They might be called to foster care or something else, you know? And so asking like questions like that, asking those like fundamental questions, working on yourself, and then also highly, you know, hopefully you'll be with someone who also is on board with adoption and wants to do that as well and everything.
Yeah. I think before we close it out, I think, and maybe you can touch on this is more of a statement as opposed to a question, but I do think, and I know I realize that we kind of, like you said, we kind of have this image, okay, I am going to go, I don't even, you know, I'm so ignorant. I don't even really know where. I guess I'd go to an agency and the perfect child's gonna run through the doors. We're gonna lock eyes. Like, that's the one. And I take her home because obviously it's a girl because, you know, I love girls. I'm gonna take her home and she's gonna be super girly. She's gonna love all the pink and we're gonna be best friends. But that's unrealistic. I think that especially when we get caught up in, you know, we see movies, we get caught up in like, as Christian women, I feel like we talk about kids, I mean, all the time. Like any conversation I have with a Christian woman, I know that
any conversation I have with a girl, you know,
with like a girl in general. I mean,
girl put out their babyless name on their
right,
phone,
exactly. So many people have their babyless names already on their phones. So I think we've built up this fantasy of adoption. And I guess like maybe you can talk a little bit about like how do we like center ourselves to realism. Realistically, my perfect little miniature Mallory might not walk through the door as like a 2-year-old that I can, you know, dress up in tutus and everything like that. Like, can you maybe for myself and everybody listening, maybe bring us back down to earth with something? I don't know.
Yeah. I would say it's like raising any other kid. It's being a parent. It's long days. It's hard. There's good moments. There's bad moments. The way you adopt can be, you know, it can be exactly how you imagine. My mom always wanted to, she like loved Russian culture and the language and stuff. She took Russian in college, I think, or something.
Oh.
And so when her and my dad decided they wanted to adopt, she ended up choosing Russia. So there can be things like that, but it could also be kind of like the story I told about my professor's wife. It could be very unexpected and not what you planned. And so I think just being open, knowing you might, you know, when you want to be an adoptive parent, having that door open, but also not planning everything. You know, there's always that joke, like when you plan out your life, God laughs.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. And, you know, I just reiterate, you know, educate yourself on the realities of adoption and what is that going to be like and everything like that. So, yeah, I would say don't plan it out. Try to reel in like the ideas of it.
Right. Your imagination.
Be more practical, maybe like settle down first, be financially stable, and really, really do your research in what you need to do. Because there's a lot of content out there that's great for hopeful adoptive parents. So I highly recommend all of that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, you were like, yeah, same thing as like biological children. I was like, well, I also imagine my children being perfect as well. Like, imagine them liking pink, but
so let me know how that works for
you. Will do. But so I just also thought of this story really quick about just how God places things. I listened to this podcast and they had this girl on who she adopted her 3 daughters. So they were driving home from, she and her husband were driving home from somewhere and they saw a lady, and I believe it was one of her daughters like on the side of the road panhandling, and she just felt drawn to like help them. So then after a while, so they went and they picked her up. I'm like, what do you need? She's like, oh, can you feed me and my daughter? And they're like, yeah, we can drop you off at home. So they drop her off at home, and hopefully I'm not butchering this story, but I can link the podcast for people to hear. But so she drops the lady and her daughter off at home, and the lady also has two other daughters. So she's like, and they're like in this not so nice area. So she just felt drawn to like, okay, let me help. Like, how can we help? What else do you need? So then she just started being involved in their lives, and like, turns out the lady was going to go to jail, and the lady was like, hey, can you just like be the guardian while I'm in jail for a little bit? So long story short, they ended up adopting them because there was a few drug issues and things like that, and she gave up her custody rights and adopted those three girls. So I just think that's another beautiful story of just like listening to God and like not having expectations in this. Obviously, I think you should definitely be open to adoption. I think that it's also a beautiful picture of what God does for us, because we're the adopted children. But I think you like really nailed it on the hand to just being open to it. Like no matter, it could be a bajillion different ways it could happen.
Yeah, there are. And also just I think a lot of people when it comes to adoption have the idea of like babies and infants.
Right.
I would say be open to any age, be open to a baby, be open to a teenager, be open to a little 7-year-old girl. I think there's a need, especially for more like teen adoptions and things like that. So just being open, maybe it's international, maybe it's foster care, maybe it's a stranger you met on the street in a pro-life organization that you work at, or something. I know Abby Johnson kind of has a crazy story with her youngest son.
That's true. Yeah.
It was just very spontaneous. So I be open to adoption. That's beautiful, but also seriously pray about it. It's not like picking a puppy out at the store. It's just like having biological children. They're kids.
Yes.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be hard, but it'll be beautiful. And so just definitely being open, but praying to whatever it is that the Lord really wants.
And last thing on the story really quick, so the oldest one I want to say was like 13, 14, and the youngest was 3. And she said that like there's difficulties at every age. So like, some people think you have the baby, you adopt the baby right off the way and everything's going to be smooth sailing. No, there's troubles with that. You adopt a 13-year-old, there's obviously going to be some troubles with that as well. But then there's also going to be some of the troubles that you would have with a child that you probably wouldn't have with a 13-year-old. It's just, it really is, like you said, like it's really something you have to pray about. And I really hope that,
I would say you pray about adoptive babies. You pray about having your own biological kids.
Yes.
Are we ready for this? Are we open to this kind of a thing? So it's really no different than raising your own biological children, except for the fact that they're adopted.
Yeah. That's good. And I hope everybody listening, we have, kind of come because I think we fantasize. We fantasize about biological children. We fantasize about adoptive children. We even fantasize about our weddings. And I think if we could just come and like really, take it all to the Lord and like be realistic about these things. Hopefully that little section knock some people off across the head.
That helps a little.
So last thing is we are starting to do this thing now where we ask every guest the same last question. So this question I should have asked you before because it's really putting you on the spot, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, so if every single girl in the world was looking at you right now, what advice would you give them?
I would say go big or go home, and don't.
I love that.
Yeah, my friend told me that. She sent me this inspirational voicemail, and that was what she told me. And I think it's in my Instagram bio now, and it's something I think about all the time. Don't do, kind of saying like, if you're gonna do it, and don't back down.
I love that.
If you're gonna do something, do it to the full. Do it to the best of your abilities. Allow it to change you and grow you. Go out. Like with you starting your podcast, like you just went for it, like
I did.
You just have to. With the nonprofit, I didn't have a following. I didn't know anything about taxes. I didn't know anything about nonprofit management, but I just did it, and the Lord allowed it to happen. And so, yeah, go big or go home, and don't go home.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
good. You need that on a t-shirt. Go big, go home, and don't go home. I like
Yeah.
that. That is a good way to end it. Well, actually, I'm gonna say this one thing about that. That is something that I want to say I've lived my life on. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. If God puts it on my heart, I'm going to do it. Whether it becomes this big, famous, great thing, which, 9 times out of 10, the things that I do will, whether it's now or later. But whether it does that or not, does not matter. I am just do it. Everybody listening, this is your sign. Go big, go home, but don't go home. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Actually, Annie, can you tell everybody where to follow you and websites, videos, whatever?
You can find me on Instagram at the Annie Fitz, and then you can find No Such Thing as Unplanned at No Such Thing as Unplanned on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and then No Such Thing as Unplanned.org. We have a lot of new stuff coming out. We're expanding. We're going to start up our adoptee support. So if you're interested, if you're an adoptee, if you're comfortable with your story, if you're working through your story, please sign up. We'd love to build up a community. If you want to write a testimonial blog for us, we have a submission page that we'll be publishing soon. So you can find us anywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram, and I hope that you choose to join us.
Yay. All right, everyone. Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you rate, review, subscribe, like, comment, follow, wherever you're listening, however you're listening. Share this with all of your friends. Share this with your friends that are adopted, that are considering adopting. Seriously, this is a really good episode. We covered a lot of topics, but I think Annie did a great job explaining everything. She's a very good orator. This is something that I think a lot of people should hear, especially those of us in the pro-life movement, because adoption is something that we suggest, that's something we support. And I think just listening, getting some information from an adoptee can truly make a difference. All right, you guys, everybody, listen to me or watch me or whatever me later. Bye.